Hello and welcome everybody to today's video and to my Austrian Grand Prix weekend preview. So we'll start with a review of last year's Grand Prix, going through some of the details from that, and move on to a few predictions later in the video of where I think this weekend is going to go and what we'll see play out. So last year it was a devastating Grand Prix for the Mercedes team, a double DNF for the first time since the 50s, and just overall crushing for them. It was a Verstappen win at the Red Bull Ring, which must have felt great for him. He was super stoked about that one. A great drive from Verstappen too, really where you could see the turning point of last season. If you were to look back through the archives, he had a very difficult start to that season, and it was right around Monaco that things started to shift, and by Austria he was winning his first race of the season. Obviously there was the double DNF, but he still had to be there to win it. So the next two in line were the two Ferraris with Raikkonen and Vettel respectively, and pretty decent weekend for them. Raikkonen did really well off the start and managed to put the fight to Verstappen for most of the race. He only finished 1.5 seconds back, and Vettel was gaining 2 a little bit by the end, finishing 3 seconds off the leader in that one. Great weekend for the Haas cars. Grosjean, Magnussen came home in 4th and 5th. I believe that was their best team finish of last year. I'll have to go back and check the records. A collective 22 points for Haas on that occasion. And just below them were the two Force Indias at the time, Ocon, Perez, collecting 14 points for the team. And you can really see that Haas and Force India, Alonso, and Sauber really capitalized on the retirements. Obviously, about halfway through the race, Ricciardo retired as well. So you had half of the usual top 6 runners out of the race. And these guys took full advantage of that. So great weekend for Haas, great weekend for Force India. Alonso had a good one, finishing 8th, 4 points there for McLaren. And then you had the two Saubers closing out the top 10 with Leclerc and Ericsson. So great weekend from those teams, really proving that when you take a few of the front runners out, that they can come in and collect some points. The next two down were Gasly and Sainz, and then you had Sirotkin and Stroll. Both Williams were 2 laps down. I think that's pretty much where you're going to see them this year. 2 laps down, maybe 3 laps down. It's a very quick course, very short course. The fastest laps are theoretically somewhere between the 105s and the 110s. So you're only just over a minute per lap, and when you are down on pace as much as a car like the Williams is, there's a chance that they could get lapped a couple or more times in this one. And you had the, technically it was 5 DNFs in last year's race, but there were 6 who didn't finish. You had Hulkenberg with that spectacular engine failure that caught fire going down the front straight, plumes of smoke and flame coming out of the back, which was impressive. And Bottas, Hamilton, obviously, Ricciardo, all retiring from the top 6. You had Hartley retiring with what was either a gearbox or hydraulic failure, from what I remember. And then Van Dorn retired on the 65th lap, but was classified a finisher. So one of those ones where he didn't technically finish the race, but it still counted as a classified finish. So overall, it was an exciting race last year. Whenever you get a few of the front runners out, it always throws a little bit of excitement in there. But there were a lot of lapped cars. Only 3 cars finished on the lead lap. So it shows you that even with those front runners out of the race, it still wasn't like someone else was going to come in and claim a podium. Everybody else was an entire lap down on those front running cars. So it's a little bit sad to see, I would say. I talked in my last video about the excitement in racing, and I think one of the biggest things that we need is the teams to be, I wouldn't say brought down a little bit, but for things to be created a little more equally. It doesn't look good when you have basically a Formula 1 and a Formula 1.5, as a lot of people have said. I don't like the optics of that. I think it would be a lot more exciting if anyone down the list could bring the fight on any given weekend based on their personal strengths, the unique strengths of the car, and their strength at that circuit in particular. When you have the 3 lead cars that didn't retire, all an entire lap ahead, and then you look down the list and you go, wow, great finish for Haas, great finish for Force India. It kind of takes something away when then it's plus 1 lap next to all of them. It's not something you want to see from a professional sport. I'm a huge hockey fan, and in the early 2000s there was a massive issue with parity. There were teams that were running the league basically You had your Detroit Red Wings, your Dallas Stars, your Colorado Avalanche. New York tried to get in there to some extent but couldn't ever really put it together. But they would dominate the free agent market. They would sign all the best players. There was no salary cap, so they could just spend as much as they wanted on the teams, and being in such big markets, they were able to just run away with all the best players. And sort of similar to what we see, obviously a little bit different with Formula One, but you have your top 3 teams that are running away with things on a weekend by weekend basis, and nobody else is allowed to even catch up, just based on the way that the economics are spread and how everything works. So a little bit of parity there would make things good. After the lockout in the NHL in 2005, they implemented a salary cap, which brought all the teams into a sort of uniform area of expenditure, and it really did increase the quality of the play, making it so that you still had dynasties, you still have people that are going to do better and people that are going to run a better team and build a better car, but you don't have teams running away with things every year, and any team can beat any team on any given night. And I would love to see a race where any team could beat any team on any given racetrack, but you're obviously still going to have the ones that are better. I don't mind that. You're always going to have a Hamilton who's just an amazing driver and runs away with everything and is annoyingly good in that respect. You can't stop that, but at least you can try to bring things back under control. So my predictions for this year's Grand Prix, I'm going to say that there won't be a safety car. A lot of runoff here, a lot of areas for the cars to pull off if there's an issue. Unless there's something major in the first corner, like a 2017 situation where Verstappen got punted off. I think it was Kvyat ran into Alonso, who hit Verstappen on the first corner in 2017. That could bring out a safety car, but in all honesty, I think you're more likely to see VSCs, maybe 1 or 2 of them if there's a failure. Like I said, in the last couple race previews, you're getting to that point in the season where teams are gambling, trying to make components last a little bit longer, trying to eke out the most possible that they can in their components, going into the second half of the season where they become quite important. So you may see a couple of mechanical failures, but unless somebody goes over one of the really harsh sausage curbs that are on the outside of the last 2 corners, I don't think that you'll see any cars retiring with damage per se. I said in the last couple race previews that I thought that at least one of the Mercedes were going to retire. That hasn't happened yet, so I'm just going to go out on a limb and say neither of the Mercedes are going to retire. And yeah, and I'm sure as soon as I say that neither of them are going to retire, one of them will retire. So it's just the nature of things, unfortunately. When you're trying to predict anything like this, everything that you thought wasn't going to happen is going to happen. Or like Canada, everything you think is going to happen, but it's all going to happen in the first 3 practices, and then the race is going to toss up some insanity. So go out on a limb and say neither of the Mercedes retire here this year, and we'll see what happens there. You'll probably have another double DNF now. My final race running, I'd say, is going to be Hamilton, Bottas, and Leclerc. I still think Vettel's a little bit shaken up. Didn't look entirely right on the French race weekend. He did recover a couple places in the race, but wasn't really where he needed to be. I think he's going to carry some of that unsurety into the latter half of the season, maybe at least this part of the European season, before he shakes his disgruntled nature with the way that the races have panned out. So your podium in my prediction will be a Hamilton, Bottas, Leclerc. I think Verstappen will get the fastest lap. I'd love to see Verstappen win here again. It was great to see last year, but I don't think that that's going to happen if my prediction of no Mercedes retirements come true. Those Mercedes cars are just too quick. This is a very power-oriented track. 3 DRS zones, and they're going to be super powerful this year, so there might be a lot of swapping places, but you might get into what they called at the last race the DRS train, where everybody is close enough to get DRS, but they all have DRS, so nobody's really passing. And you do get some instances in Austria where cars are able to make it past in one DRS zone and then just pass again in the next DRS zone, and it's sort of just the cycle of one car catches the other, which catches the other, and they just go back and forth swapping those 2 places the whole race, sort of like a merry-go-round of places. I'll say my driver to watch out for this weekend will be Lando Norris. After that performance in France, if his car is working properly this weekend, I'm sure he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. to show that France was no fluke. And I think McLaren have a lot more pace than we're used to this year and may be able to show us something that we weren't expecting. I think the team to watch here will be Racing Point. I think with the finish that they had here last year, power-oriented track, so it suits their car. You saw what Stroll was able to do in Canada. I think that they'll have a great weekend. Maybe look for them to finish in a 6-7. So definitely a team to watch there. So there are some of my predictions for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have an awesome race weekend. I hope that we see some more exciting racing, maybe even some more controversy through the season to really spice things up. So thank you all for joining. Have a great day and goodbye.